morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have seen a good number of us joined already. Thank you so much. We're going to be starting very soon. But first, I'd just like to say a few things, and we would also start to do the usual things we do at the start of the sessions, which is the introduction. I see that our speaker is already in the house. Thank you so much, Nicole. It's great to have you join us. So, being that our speaker is already here, I'll just start now with the introduction of today's session. While I do that, I would like us to head to the chat box and drop our names, the country from which we're joining from, our profession, and every other thing you want to tell us for today. So things such as your motivation for joining the section, pharmacogenomics in your region, the level of awareness of people there amongst pharmacists, among the healthcare professionals generally. So these are things you can tell us in the chat box. So while I get straight to introducing our speaker now and starting the session, your name, the country from which you're joining us, your profession, and any other thing you want to tell us. Thank you so much. Let's get straight to that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Nicole. So, welcome everyone once again. Good evening, distinguished participants. Welcome to day 6 of the Pharmacogenomics and Precision Medicine webinar series, themed Precision Medicine in Practice, from Genomics to Real-World Impact. Our session today, which is the 6th day of the series, is titled Pharmacogenomics, Practical Navigation of Open Access Pharmacogenomics Resources and Interactive Case-Based Learning. And it will be presented by Nicole Keuler, a leading pharmacogenomics researcher and faculty member at the School of Pharmacy, University of Cape Town, University of West Cape, Cape Town, South Africa. I'm honored to be your moderator for this session today. And my name is Destiny Elogosa Ale, the founder of PharmaGenoXfE. And before we begin, I would like to start with something very exciting, a very exciting news for today, which is the fact that we are collaborating with the Clinical Pharmacist Association of Nigeria, Edo State chapter. I want to extend my great gratitude to CPAN, which is the Clinical Pharmacist Association of Nigeria, Edo State chapter, and by extension to every other CPAN sister body across Africa present here today for their collaboration throughout the rest of this series. This partnership enriches the series as we continue to journey across the sessions. I'd also love to thank and recognize, I don't know if he's already on the call, my mentor, a father and our advisor, who also doubles as the person, the pillar behind this collaboration, our highly respected and distinguished clinical pharmacist Ifeanyi Akpe. As a quick reminder, before we move into the session, Please ensure you are in a quiet environment and keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. If you have any questions, kindly put them in the chat box. We will have a Q&A section at the end where we'll be taking all of these questions. We look forward to an engaging session as we explore practical approaches to assessing and applying pharmacogenomics resources. Thank you. So I'll move straight now to introducing our speaker for today and bringing her up to the microphone. Now, our speaker for today is Nicole Keuler. Nicole Keuler is a pharmacogenomics researcher and faculty member, School of Pharmacy, University of Western Cape, South Africa. Nicole is a pharmacist, a researcher, and an educator from Cape Town, South Africa. She leads the Master of Clinical Pharmacy program presented by the School of Pharmacy at the University of Western Cape in Cape Town, South Africa. Her PhD aims to develop a pharmacogenomics curriculum framework for pharmacy education in South Africa. Through the University of Missouri, South Africa Education Program grant, she was able to observe pharmacogenomics clinics in the United States and bring back her experience to South Africa. She is the vice chair of the Global Committee of the Pharmacogenomics Global Research Network, PGRN, and a member of the Clinical Pharmacogenomics Implementation Consortium. She was the co-organizer of the PGX Winter School and Stakeholder Engagement Workshop, two inaugural events which took place in July 2025 with the aim to develop a national pharmacogenomics stewardship program to advance pharmacogenomics in South Africa. International collaborations of genomics implementation in South Africa. This is something that she recognizes and she is actively pushing and pursuing. Ladies and gentlemen, if our hands are not busy, I'd like to see the emojis in the chat box. I'd like to see us welcome our distinguished speaker for today, Nicole Keuler. I would hand over the mic to you now, Nicole.
Okay, good evening, colleagues. Thank you so much, Destiny, for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited to share a bit of my passion for pharmacogenomics with you tonight. And I just want to really thank you for the work that you're doing. I think you're doing great work. I know it takes a lot of effort and this does not come easily. And it's really hard work to achieve what you've done. So well done. And also well done to your mentor. I think it's great that we have this in the field of pharmacogenomics. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I think you just have to give me permission. Destiny, will you give me permission to just share my screen?
Yeah, I just saw that now. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, you can see my screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm very excited to share a bit of my passion for pharmacogenomics with you tonight. It's really also a privilege to do this on an African platform. And I think this map of Africa just really shows the diversity and really how welcoming and exciting we are in an African country. So this is Angela. Don't you think she's beautiful? So her mom and dad shared her story at a CPIC meeting about 2 years ago. And Angela was admitted a few years ago before Christmas, and she was diagnosed with Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And they think that it was due to the ibuprofen that she took. Unfortunately, she passed away a few days after Christmas. And now her mom and dad travels around the world and shares a story and creates awareness about patients that have specific genes, like the HLA genes, that can predispose patients to allergic reactions caused like Stevens-Johnson syndrome and toxic epidermal necrosis. So did you know that some medicines that are causing Stevens-Johnson syndrome and toxic epidermal necrosis, even DRESS, they think, are caused by a specific HLA gene? These are like
Sorry,
yes.
Nicole, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you short. There seems to be this dark thing on top. Yeah, it's blocking the view just
Oh, I don't.
to the top right hand side.
Yeah, I don't see it on my screen. I don't see it on my screen actually.
I don't know.
Is this okay?
Okay, yeah, one of them has just left now. There's still the top one, the bigger one on top.
Yeah, I can't see that one on my side.
Oh wow, wow, wow.
I
Okay,
don't
okay,
think it
please.
will impact. It's just for these slides, but I can share my slides with you.
Okay, okay, go ahead, please.
Okay. Um, okay. These are medicines like, for example, carbamazepine or phenytoin that patients, when they have an HLA gene, it can actually lead to allergic reactions. Did you know that a patient will not be started on a back cover in the US before they actually do HLA-B5701 testing? So this doesn't happen in South Africa, but if you look at this map, it summarizes HLA frequencies for HLA-B5701, HLA-B50A1, and HLA-B1502. And if you look at Africa, you can see that we have less than 1% of the HLA-B5701 prevalence in South Africa. So it means it means that there's very low percentage and risk that the patient actually will have an allergic reaction or an adverse drug reaction. But the HLA-B5801 gene that can predispose patients to reactions due to allopurinol, they actually have a prevalence of about 5 to 10%. So we actually have seen patients tested positive for this gene and also experiencing side effects. So this is just an overview of my presentation. So I'm just going to give you a background a bit about pharmacogenomics. We're going to look at the basics of pharmacogenomics. What does pharmacogenomics look like in healthcare? Looking at some pharmacogenomics resources, and then also looking at a clinical scenario. So in terms of a bit about a background, in terms of pharmacogenomics and bringing it home, the clinical implementation of pharmacogenomics has really been very slow in low to middle income countries. And there's various reasons for that. We do have poor capacity. We have various barriers to implementation. We have limited funding, specifically in pharmacogenomics. There is a lot of more pressing needs, like access to medicine, actually, that requires attention. And there's a lot of questions about the clinical applicability of pharmacogenomics. And there's also various limited studies that has been done. So there's still a lot to explore. Sub-Saharan Africa accounts for about 25% of the global disease burden. So this really shows us that there is potential for pharmacogenomics to improve patient care. In South Africa specifically, we face a quadruple burden of disease. And when we look at this, we have seen that pharmacogenomics can improve patient outcomes in patients with retroviral disease, TB, non-communicable diseases. And if we look at non-communicable diseases, specifically in the field of cardiovascular conditions and also oncology. The majority of studies that has been done was actually done in developed countries, and limited studies were actually done in developing countries or low to middle income countries. If we look at the data that is currently available, less than 5% of PharmaGKB's data is actually from an African population. There has been some studies done in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria, and this is summarizing this, but there's also a need for greater research, especially in Africa. If we look at Africa, we also have very unique aspects. So we have a lot of traditional medicine use and herbal medication use that can actually lead to phenoconversion, and we'll talk about that in the next few slides. And then pharmacogenomics also has great potential to improve patient outcomes in Africa. This is just to show you what projects are currently happening in Africa. There's quite a lot going on, and this was published in 2025, so I know there's a lot more research happening, but just shows you what is actually happening on the African continent. This was from a study in 2020, so it's not updated, but this is just to show you the regions where pharmacogenomic studies has been done. You can see a lot has been done in African America and Northern Africa, but there is a need for representation of the African continent. This just shows you the types of studies that has been done across various conditions. You can see a lot has been done in cardiovascular disease, also kidney disease, but there are some areas that require greater representation. This is from a colleague that is actually also from Africa, and this shows you the number of, or the percentage of participants in studies that have looked at CYP2D6. And if we look at sub-Saharan Africa, you can see it accounts for less than 3%. So there is a big need, and it's not really representative of Africa. So in this slide from the same author than the previous slide, it is quite a busy slide, but it shows the medicines on the left-hand side. It shows the genes. It also shows the phenotype, which I'll talk to you about now. And then also what are CPAN recommendations. So this slide shows actionable pharmacogenes. So it tells us that it's genes that have enough information to inform prescribing. So either to recommend an alternative or to actually recommend a dosage change. So for example, if we look at efavirenz, we don't typically use this a lot anymore, but I know there are some countries that still use this. So here we have the phenotype. So this tells us about the functional status, and we can see there's quite a percentage of people that are intermediate metabolizers. And if you look at the CPAN guidelines, the blue here is the standard dosing, and then the orange recommends like if we need a change in the dose or a change in the medicine. So for efavirenz, you can see that there's quite a large percentage where we actually need a change in the dose for the medicine. Okay. And then another one, if we look, for example, at phenytoin, there's intermediate metabolizers that maybe require a dose adjustment. Okay, so we also have some unique challenges in Africa and in low to middle income countries. We do not have access to electronic health records yet. I know there are some hospital groups, especially in South Africa, where they have electronic health records, but this really is a big barrier to implementation of pharmacogenomics. If we have electronic health records, it will really improve implementation of pharmacogenomics, where, for example, in the developed countries, the pharmacogenomics results are included in the health record. So it really makes it easy for healthcare professionals to be aware of it and to access the patient's results. So this really makes it easier in terms of continuity of care. It also really makes it easier in terms of monitoring and evaluation. And then another challenge is some pharmacogenomic testing. So the cost of pharmacogenomics can be quite expensive, although this is a once in a lifetime test. It can be expensive for people. It's not currently reimbursed by medical aids. There are some medical aids that are reimbursing, but it can still be a barrier. There's also a lot of testing labs, and there's a need for standardization in these labs to make sure that these tests are done appropriately and correctly and meet the standards. Globally, there is a need for education of pharmacogenomics. So there's a need for educating healthcare professionals and also students. But there's also a need for standardization because globally there is a need for to standardize education for healthcare professionals on pharmacogenomics. There are international competency standards, and that is something for us to look at and see how we can adapt and benchmark our education. Although there's limited research being done, there is a few groups that's very active in terms of conducting research. And I've just listed some of these for you. There might be more, but these groups are quite active. Because there has been limited research done in Africa, there's a question about the clinical validity and utility in Africa, because there might be some alleles that have not been researched in our setting, and these guidelines still needs to be developed. In terms of regulations, this is really important to ensure that we govern pharmacogenomics and that we apply the necessary ethical, legal, and social implications. So there's really a need for regulatory authorities, especially in Africa, to provide guidance on pharmacogenomic testing, but also implementation. I think hopefully by this time of the series, you've realized that pharmacogenomics really plays an important role in pharmacovigilance. But unfortunately, pharmacovigilance, we do not do enough adverse drug reaction reporting. And at this stage, it's very difficult to make associations and to determine causality because we do not do the testing regularly. So it's not routinely done. So we cannot, for example, determine that all these Stevens-Johnson reactions of carbamazepine is related to an HLA gene, although we can just make assumptions, but we need to make sure that we practice evidence-based medicine. There's also a need for next generation sequencing. This is to make sure that pharmacogenomic testing is accessible and that it's cost effective. And this will help us to also identify various different alleles. I've mentioned that there's a great need for standardization in the education or teaching of pharmacogenomics, but also in terms of pharmacogenomic testing and reporting, because there has been studies done that has shown that various labs report on different alleles and has different reporting structures. So there's really a need to standardize this to ensure that we practice pharmacogenomics ethically and soundly. In our setting, in Africa, we have to consider ethical, legal, and social implications. We have a very genetic diverse population, and there is a document that is in the references on considering ethical, legal, and social implications and how it should inform policy and implementation. There's really a need in terms of educating patients on their results. And this requires counseling. We have globally, there's a shortage of genetic counselors, and there has been discussions of pharmacists actually performing genetic counseling. Then in Africa, we have a very unique culture. We have to look at, what does the community say about pharmacogenomics? What is the jargon that we need to use? What are the religious and cultural beliefs? So there's need for research in that field, including the community. And we also have a lot of herbal and traditional medicine use that can also lead to drug-drug interactions, and that has not been fully explored. I've mentioned a bit about reimbursement. There is a big need for pharmacoeconomic studies to show the cost utility and the cost benefit and cost effectiveness of pharmacogenomics, and that can really then support reimbursement. Then further in Africa, we also have like a very unique healthcare setting where we have a public and a private healthcare setting, and it is important to ensure that we have equitable access to pharmacogenomic testing. So meaning that patients both in the public and the private sector needs to have equitable access to pharmacogenomics. So some of the solutions, we don't have all the answers, but based on on literature and what we've experienced is that there's a great need for research, implementation, and education of pharmacogenomics, and this needs to happen in parallel. A lot of implementation is often supported by research, and they should really be grounded in ethical, legal, and social considerations. And implementation might look different in various settings as well, because every country has its unique challenges and systems and structures. So one of the things that has been highlighted in literature is like collaboration between developed and developing countries. One thing that has been highlighted is that pharmacogenomics, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from people that has been before us. So this is really important in terms of also practicing evidence-based medicine, collaborating with the collaboration between developed and developing countries in terms of research, implementation, and education, and optimizing the resources that we actually have. So I just want to take a brief moment and just check with you, Destiny. Are we still fine? Are there any, can you still see that black thing at the top?
Yeah, I
Okay, let me try and reshare my screen. I'm not sure why it's actually doing
I'm
that.
now seeing 4 patches.
Okay, let me
Yeah,
just see.
let's just hope it doesn't happen again this time.
Let's just see if I can.
Oh wow, it's bigger now.
Can you, how is this? Can you, or is it still there?
Okay, yeah, it's just dark, just like a rectangle covering the top of the slide, and
Yeah,
then
it's very
that's all
weird.
this.
I can't see that. I can't change it or anything. It's
Wow.
I just it
Just
actually
just at
disappeared.
that point where your mouse is currently now.
Yes, but I can't see it. It's not on my screen.
All right.
It's not um
Oh my goodness. There's even a bigger one now. I don't know. I tried seeing if it's maybe from any of the participants, but um
yeah, it's
okay,
not. I can't see it. I can't see it on my screen. Um
okay. Let's get on with it. Let's get on with it.
okay. Okay.
Yep.
Then I just want to get in some basics of pharmacogenomics. So this is your CYP2D6 gene. Okay, this is a gene. Then we have your diplotype. So your diplotype is also often called your genotype. So you have one from mom, one from dad, and this makes your phenotype. So your phenotype tells us about the functional status about the gene. So it tells us, for example, it's an ultra-rapid metabolizer or a normal metabolizer, intermediate metabolizer. And that's just some basics. So this is typically just showing you visually what will happen in the body in terms of your medication concentration and over time. So for example, your normal metabolizer will be here in the middle. That will kind of be your standard. But if you have a poor or an intermediate metabolizer, then your patient will metabolize the medicine at a slower rate, and you can have increased concentration and increased risk of side effects. Then when you have a rapid or ultra rapid metabolizer, your body will metabolize the medicine quicker and you'll have reduced concentration, and then you can have an increased risk for treatment failure because you'll have lower levels of the medicine. But it is also important to know if you have an active parent drug or an inactive prodrug. So when you have an active parent drug that is metabolized to an inactive metabolite, and this process is slowed down, so let's say you have an intermediate metabolizer or a slow metabolizer, then the concentration of the active drug will increase and your patient will have risk of side effects, okay? But when you have an inactive prodrug that needs to be metabolized to an active metabolite, then, for example, like tramadol or clopidogrel. So if you then slow down this process, or like with an intermediate or a poor metabolizer, then your inactive prodrug concentration will increase, but you won't have an active metabolite. So your patient will have a decreased effect of the medicine. Okay, so this is important to notice with some of these inactive prodrugs, and typical things are like tramadol, clopidogrel, or codeine. There's also a lot of non-genetic factors that influence a patient response that you need to be aware of. So, for example, smoking. So, smoking is a CYP1A2 inducer. So, you have a medicine, for example, clozapine, it will interact with smoking. I'm sure you are familiar with renal function and hepatic function and comorbid conditions and how does it influence a patient's response to medicine and age. And I want to highlight phenoconversion. So, what is phenoconversion? So, it's this mismatch between a patient's genotype predicted response, so their results on paper, and then the true capacity to actually metabolize these medicines. And this is where your inducers and your inhibitors come in. So I think for us living in a low to middle income country, we are very aware of rifampicin and the drug-drug interactions associated with it. But it's also important to be aware of the inhibitors. And you can see in this list, you have a lot of your antidepressants that can lead to inhibition, and that can influence other medications response. Then there's also genetic factors that influence a patient response, so transporters, HLA genes, and some of the enzymes as well. So in the next few slides, I want to show you a bit about the landscape of pharmacogenomics in healthcare in terms of summarizing the various conditions and the diseases where pharmacogenomics has actionable recommendations. So in the next few slides, I've summarized for you conditions and then the actionable gene-drug pairs. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is just to show you some of the important gene-drug pairs. And if it's actionable, it means that there is enough information, so there's enough data that has shown to inform prescribing, so to change a dose or to recommend an alternative medicine. So one of the conditions where pharmacogenomics has really shown to improve patient care is mental health. So you can see, for example, with your SSRIs, although this is a class, there's various enzymes that are involved in the metabolisms of these medicines. And you can see, for example, sertraline is metabolized by CYP2B6, but also CYP2C9. So there's more than one gene that you actually need to consider. There might be more genes, but these are actionable. The same with amitriptyline, you have to consider 2D6 and also CYP2C9. And then here we've also summarized more for you. I think it is important to know that approximately 50% of adults with major depressive disorder have an inadequate response to their initial medication regimen. So pharmacogenomics has really helped to reduce that trial and error phase and help us to personalize medication therapy, especially in the field of mental health. Next is pharmacogenomics in cardiovascular conditions. So I've split them into anticoagulants, antiplatelets, beta blockers, and statins. So warfarin is quite challenging to prescribe, especially with pharmacogenomic testing. There is a specific algorithm that guides prescribing in terms of results. And then if we look at our beta blockers, you will see not all of the beta blockers are listed here because not all of them have actionable recommendations. They are mainly metabolized by CYP2D6. So when you have a patient, for example, that is a poor metabolizer and CYP2D6 or intermediate metabolizer, they can have increased risk of side effects. So they can have severe bradycardia if they are a slower metabolizer. Then if we look at our statins, it's mostly our SLCO1B1 transporter. And you will see this transporter is relevant to all the statins. And then some of the statins, there's also other genes that we have to consider. Another field where pharmacogenomics has shown to impact patient care is in pain therapy. So if we look at our NSAIDs, it's mostly they're metabolized by CYP2C9. And there are different recommendations, for example, for celecoxib versus meloxicam, because meloxicam has a longer half-life than celecoxib. If we look at our opioids, it's mostly CYP2D6. and I've just listed our tricyclic antidepressants here as well. And carbamazepine, since we often use this in pain therapy as well. So with carbamazepine, it's more about the HLA genes. And if a patient has either one of these genes, they have a risk for Stevens-Johnson syndrome. So if, for example, a patient is HLA 1502 positive, it means that they have a high risk for, or definitely a risk for Stevens-Johnson syndrome. If they are negative in these HLA genes, it doesn't mean they don't have the risk. They just have a lower risk or a low risk compared to someone that is positive. I've also listed duloxetine is sometimes used as off-label, but this is also a CYP2D6 inhibitor. So something to be aware of when you look at your patient results. Then infectious diseases, especially in Africa. I'm sure you're familiar with efavirenz and CYP2D6, isoniazid, where we have the NAT2 gene, and then some others to consider, especially voriconazole in the fungal area. And then PPIs is also relevant to pharmacogenomics, so they're mostly metabolized by CYP2C19. So there are patients, for example, that are rapid metabolizers that would need a higher dose, almost double dose of proton pump inhibitor, especially with H. pylori eradication. Otherwise, they have risk of treatment failure. Esomeprazole and rabeprazole are second generation, so they have less drug interactions. And then the other field where pharmacogenomics has really impact patient care is in the oncology field. So DPYD is like the new kid on the block. It's not so new anymore, but it has been a lot on, if you're active on LinkedIn, you might have seen this. But it is now an FDA requirement for patients that are started on capecitabine to go for DPYD testing. The side effects are really severe, and patients can die if they are DPYD deficient. There was an FDA workshop on DPYD testing, and patients have shared their stories, and it was really quite shocking to hear the side effects that they have shared. And then I've also listed here ondansetron, although we don't use it for oncology or like cancer treatment itself, it is something that our oncology patients use. So CYP2D6 is relevant there. And another one I also just want to highlight is tamoxifen, which we also typically use in our setting, that is metabolized by CYP2D6. So in the next few slides, I want to go into the clinical application of pharmacogenomics and use scenarios to share with you. So this is the time where you kind of have to get your phone ready and be willing to participate. So you're the pharmacist working in the hospital, and the oncologist phones you and asks for your advice. He has a patient that requires a prescription for capecitabine and another patient that requires a prescription for tamoxifen. He's heard about pharmacogenomics, and his patients have actually asked him, do they think it's necessary to perform this testing? But he would like to hear from you. What are your recommendations as a healthcare professional? Okay, so first of all, I want to know what resources will you consult to guide clinical decision making? So if you can type it in the chat, I think that would be helpful. I'll see if I can see the chat. Okay, CPIC, I have CPIC. Great. Anyone else wants to share? Okay. All right. So CPIC is definitely a very valuable resource. If there is one thing from tonight that you remember, it is ClinPGX. This is really a very robust, evidence-based resource that is freely available, and it has a lot of information. So I would really like to encourage you to explore this website. The QR code on this slide will take you to the ClinPGX website. So the ClinPGX website has now incorporated PharmGKB, CPIC, PharmVar, and PharmCat. So it really combines everything in one database. This is a bookmark on my computer. It has a shortcut because this is my go-to resource whenever I need to look at pharmacogenomics. So in terms of clinical implementation, we would use a lot of PharmGKB. So this is really summarizing various variations in genomics. Genetics, the CPIC guideline is an evidence-based guideline that it's a group of international experts, and they provide evidence-based guidelines where they do systematic reviews. All of their guidelines follow the same approach, so it's very standardized. It's written in a way that healthcare professionals can understand it, and it's usually not a lot of pages. And I see somebody is drawing on my screen. If we can maybe just prevent that.
Yeah, I don't know where that's coming from.
Okay, maybe I'll just, okay, there it's gone. Maybe I'll just share my screen again. Then we also have PharmCat and PharmVar. PharmVar assigns alleles to the haplotype, so you can have a look at that. And then PharmCat is another database that also use. But mostly when you're in practice, CPIC, PharmGKB is what you will use a lot. So this is typically how the ClinPGX website looks. I'm going to go through all of these. It's quite a busy site, and it takes some time to practice. But once you're familiar with it, I think you'll really enjoy this website. So at the bottom, there are 3 sections as well on this page. There's a knowledge section, so they have a whole page for cancer pharmacogenetics. You can look at allele functions, allele frequencies, and there's also a section on education, so a lot of free educational resources as well. So the first section is focused on precision guidance, and then there's also curated pharmacogenomics evidence. There's a specific link to the CPIC website, and then there's also a specific section on pediatrics as well. So if we look at PharmDog, this is a different type of dog. You can either go through to the genetic test results section, or you can search by medication name. So when you go to the genetic test result, it will look something like this. So you can actually type in your patient's genotype and then determine the phenotype. I would recommend that you rather include the genotype and then see what does the phenotype say, and then how does it compare with your actual patient's results that you have on paper. Because there has been studies that have shown that labs have use various resources to actually determine the phenotype. Then you can also search by medication name. So you can type in the medicine name. These are according to conditions. And then you can see, for example, this medication has CPIC guideline, all these FDA recommendations. Then you can go to genes on that page, and then you can see these genes are listed alphabetically. It gives you the level of evidence. It tells you if there's an FDA label, if there's an EMA label. This is an oncology guideline, CPIC guideline. There's the DPWG guideline, or table of pharmacogenomics table. And then you can actually, or the FDA pharmacogenomics table, and then you can look at these in more detail. So this is just to show you how CPIC determines their level of evidence. But usually CPIC A or B tells you that it can inform prescribing either as an alternative or recommending a dosage change. Then you can also go to drugs on that ClinPGX website. This tells you then if there is a guideline, what does the FDA drug labeling say, and if there is any, if it's part of the table of pharmacogenetics associations. If you go to pairs, this is what your table will look like. It has the gene drug pairs, and again, it tells you which organizations have guidelines. Then you can go to guidelines. So I would recommend that you typically use this. So guidelines, again, you have the medication listed in alphabetical order, but you can also type the medication name, and then it tells you if there's CPIC guidelines or DPWG guidelines. And then when you click on this, it will take you to a page similar to this. And then you can read the annotations and explore these on the left as well. Then there's also drug labels. So these are recommendations from regulatory agencies. Again, it's listed alphabetically, so you can type the name, and it tells you what is the FDA, EMA, and then this organization also mentioned. So for example, you can see HLA-B testing is required, but you also have to look at what is the prevalence in the setting that you are. Then the pathways are quite nice. These are figures that shows you the metabolism of medicines. This is especially very nice for academics or for students that would want to learn more, or if you just want to, if you're a visual learner, especially. There's also a tab that you can just type the name in, and then it will show you the medication. So in the CPIC tab, this is typically how it will look like. You can click on guidelines, or you can go to the gene tables. So if you click on the guidelines, it will show you this page. You can either search by gene or by the medicine or by the guideline, and then click on it for more information. Or you can also go to the tables. So here we have all the genes listed, and for each of these genes, we have links to, what is the allele definition. Here we can look at the frequency table. So this is a summary of the prevalence of these genes, for example, country specific. But you also have to consider if there's not a lot of research being done, that can influence the results as well. Then the DPWG is the Dutch Pharmacogenetics Working Group. So they have their own guidelines, and this is specifically in Europe that they use a lot of these guidelines. This is also freely available. And then the FDA has a table of pharmacogenetics, biomarkers, and drug labeling. So it summarizes the labeling recommendations. This list has 608 medications on. It started with a list than less than 200. So it just shows you how the field is growing. And then there's also a table of pharmacogenetics associations, which have sections for therapeutic management, potential impact on safety, and then pharmacokinetic properties that you can also explore more. So I want to go back to our patient. Just to remind you, because we've shared a lot of information now, we have a patient that needs a prescription for capecitabine and another patient that needs a prescription for tamoxifen. And the doctor would like to know if you have any recommendations for testing. Should he perform testing, or would it be unnecessary for the patient? So we have now looked at, let's look at tamoxifen first. What would be your recommendation? Do you think we should perform testing? What does the evidence say? And what would be your approach in terms of determining if this is necessary? So I'll give you a minute to think about it and maybe type it in the chat. And I also would like to hear from you if you're able to navigate through especially the ClinPGX website. Okay, I have that testing is necessary. Is there maybe a reason why you say so? Is there someone that says no, an allergy could occur? Okay, so let's look at how you would approach this. So this is a pathway, and the link here will take you to the pathway. And this is from the ClinPGX website. And you can see here that tamoxifen is actually a prodrug. So tamoxifen needs to be metabolized to endoxifen, which is the active agent, which actually causes the pharmacological effect. And you can see that there's quite a lot of enzymes involved here, but the main enzyme is CYP2D6. There's more, but we don't have enough information about them yet. So this might change in the future. So we know now that CYP2D6 is involved here, main enzyme that can actually influence treatment. But let's look at what you would do. So go to ClinPGX, go to guidelines. This is where I would start. Go to the guidelines. When I just started typing tamoxifen, and then it will automatically show you what is the result closest. It already gave me tamoxifen, and here I can see there's a CP guideline, there's a DPWG recommendation, and there's also some other guidelines as well. So when I click on this CPIC, it will take me to a page that looks similar to this. But when you scroll down, you come to this big table that gives you the recommendations. But if you click here, you can see that there's a clinical pharmacogenomics implementation. So this is a CP guideline for CYP2D6. So this is what I would recommend starting with, especially if you're starting in the field. It's really great to read these guidelines, to become familiar with them. They have a lot of information. And like I said, they're all quite user-friendly to use. So I think you'll be able to interpret this in an easy way. So I would like to go to the guidelines first. So this is how the typical guideline will look like at the start. And usually your recommendations is in table 2. Unless you have medicines that, for example, that there's more than one gene, or if it's within a class, they, for example, will have different recommendations. For example, the celecoxib one has one for celecoxib and one for meloxicam. So you have to make sure that you're using the appropriate table. So here we have recommendations for CYP2D6. Okay. So you can see, for example, it has the metabolizing status, it has the implications, so it actually explains to you, it tells you what are the recommendations, and then also what is the strength of the recommendation. So for example, with ultra rapid and normal metabolizers, you'll have therapeutic endoxifen. But when you go to intermediate and poor metabolizers, you will have lower concentrations of endoxifen because they won't be able to be activated to the active ingredient, and you have higher risk of treatment failure and recurrence. And it's actually recommended to consider an alternative, especially in poor metabolizers, because the recommendation is quite strong. Or you can go to drug labels as well. And here I just also started typing tamoxifen, and this is what it gave me. And I can actually see, what does these regulatory authorities say about tamoxifen? So I can see for this estrogen sensitive receptors, the cancer type, it's recommended that testing is required. CYP2D6 is informative, so it tells me that there is information that can actually lead to prescribing changes. And then there's another gene as well, but we don't have enough information about that yet. So when you click on CYP2D6, it will show you this table to, what does the FDA recommend, and it gives you a summary as well. Or you can go to CPIC, the CPIC page or the CPIC section, and go to guidelines. And here you can type in tamoxifen, and then you can click on the guideline as well. Or when you click on tamoxifen, it will take you to this page, and it will actually give you a summary here, and you can navigate through this bar on the left-hand side. What is nice here is that you can actually include your patient's genotype as well, and use this as a resource to actually double check it. Okay, so we can see that tamoxifen doing CYP2D6 testing can really maybe change prescribing practices, so it can be considered. The next one is capecitabine. So I have mentioned it in my presentation before. So maybe I will ask you first if you can recall which gene is associated with capecitabine, and do you think we should test the patient if we want to start capecitabine. Okay, so I also see a comment that physician should have the diagnosis to reconcile the gene and the patient. So great. I think that is very important what you've highlighted. What we are doing here is just showing you how to navigate this, but definitely the diagnosis needs to be confirmed. You need to make sure that actually the medicine is indicated. I also just want to highlight that pharmacogenomics is a great tool. It can really impact patient care. It can prevent adverse drug reactions. It can really improve our patient outcomes. But it is also just a tool. It is just one tool in our toolbox that can improve patient care. And we need to look at this holistically. It's also important to note that pharmacogenomics is not always the answer to everything. There's still a lot of medicines that actually do not have enough information to guide prescribing. And that might change in the future. But it is still a complex topic and something where healthcare professionals need to be educated to actually practice in this area. Okay, so DPYD, great. Yes, so DPYD testing is necessary if a patient is considered to be taking capecitabine. So again, I would go to ClinPGX guidelines or then drug labels. You can go to drug labels in this case, and here you can see, for example, the FDA says testing is required. The EMA also says testing is required. And there's another guideline that also says testing is required. So if it is required, it really means that you need to do testing before starting therapy, because it can have severe impact on patient care. Okay, and here you can actually see what are the recommendations. You can see this is very clearly written, and these guidelines are updated continuously, and all the updates are also summarized on the pages. So it is important that you have a look at that and make sure you use the latest guidelines. So for example, with poor or intermediate metabolizers, they will have decreased DPYD activity. So they will have increased risk of severe side effects and even fatality. So it is recommended to reduce the starting dose, and depending on the activity score, you either have to start with 25% of the dose or 50% of the dose to start the patient on it. And then with poor metabolizers, it actually recommends that you avoid fluorouracil or capecitabine because of the side effects and the toxicity that these patients can experience. And it is recommended that it is a strong recommendation. So these are things that you can use to support your evidence and inform your practice. Okay, so the doctor was very impressed. He really appreciates your input, and he decides to perform testing for these patients. And now we actually get the results. So this is typically how a pharmacogenomics report will look like. This is just for academic purposes, just to show you. Typically, we will either do a buccal swab, so a cheek swab, or they can do a blood test. And then there will always be like a summary table where you have your genes, you have your genotype, and then also your alleles that has been tested, and then your phenotype. So with the alleles, it is important that these are listed there to make sure that to see what alleles the panel is testing, and to also double check the results. And then there's also a section summarizing the HLA results. Usually this page is followed by a lot of pages explaining the results, and it can be very overwhelming for healthcare professionals to actually go through this report. The pharmacogenomic testing can either be done reactively or preemptively. So reactive is when we, for example, have a patient with mental health not responding to therapy, maybe depression, and we want to do a pharmacogenomic test, and we find that we maybe need alternative therapy or a dosage change. Preemptive is when we, for example, in these cases that we've discussed tonight, where we have to where we first do a test and then it informs prescribing or initiation of a medicine. So this is our patient's results. When we look at tamoxifen, again, first, we have an intermediate metabolizer. So our patient is an intermediate metabolizer of CYP26. So I would want to know from you, what would be your recommendation in terms of tamoxifen for our patient? Can the prescriber prescribe CYP26, tamoxifen? Is it something where we should just consider a dosage change or an alternative? What would be your recommendation? So I'll give you a minute to think about that and to navigate through resources. Anyone wants to share any recommendations that they have? I'm really sorry about the black box. I don't know why it is showing on my screen. I can't see it on my screen, so I don't know why you are seeing it, but I hope you can see most of my screen. Okay, so I'm gonna go on. So when you access the CP guideline, I'll remember our patient is an intermediate metabolizer. So it recommends here that, or it says the implication is that you will have lower concentration of endoxifen, which is the active ingredient, and you have a higher risk for breast cancer recurrence and treatment failure. So there is a moderate recommendation to consider alternative therapy like aromatase inhibitors, but you also have to make sure that we consider the cancer diagnosis as well, and alternative therapy that is indicated for that. They also recommend that you can consider a higher dose, but you need to monitor the patient, and that you should avoid CYP26 inhibitors because it can change the patient's functional status. So this is something that you can share with the prescriber. What would be your recommendation in terms of that? I want to show you when you go to PharmDog, you can actually, and you go to the medication, you can type in, okay, you can search for tamoxifen, then you can actually type in the patient's genotype. So there are 2 alleles, and then you can say view recommendation. So this is our patient's one. And then it will show you a summary of this is an intermediate metabolizer. What are the recommendations from CP, DPWG? And then there's also actually a section where you can include the inhibitor. So, for example, fluoxetine, or if the patient is on anything else. And then you can also view the recommendation. And you can see that it actually changes the patient's status from an intermediate to a poor metabolizer. So this is quite a very nice resource to use, and to also see what is the impact of other medicines that the patient is on. The FDA also has a list of inhibitors, and if there are strong inhibitors or weak inhibitors, and that is on the slide for the on the phenoconversion slide. Okay, and then next is the DPYD. So we have our patient as a poor metabolizer. This has implications. So when you look at the guidelines, you will see that you should avoid fluorouracil or capecitabine, and you should rather recommend an alternative. So this is a very strong recommendation. And if we know that our patient is a poor metabolizer, we can prevent prescribing of this, and we can prevent severe side effects and even mortality. Then I also just want to give you an opportunity to explore a bit of ondansetron. So this is also typically an agent that we use in oncology patients, and it can have impact on our patient care. So for example, I want to just maybe hear from you if you can recall which genes are associated with ondansetron. So if you can type that in the chat. If you can remember which gene is associated with ondansetron. Okay, so if you're not sure, that is totally fine. You can go to our CYP26. Okay, I have CYP26, great. If you cannot remember, you can go to the ClinPGX website. You can go under drugs or under guidelines, and you can just search for ondansetron, and it will show you what is the guideline and what is the gene that is relevant. And you can do some more reading in the CP guideline as well. So here we, for example, have our patient. If he's a CYP26 intermediate metabolizer, we can go to the guideline of ondansetron, and you can actually see with intermediate metabolizers, there's very limited data, but they recommend to initiate with normal starting dose and monitor the patient. It should work. But if you, for example, have an ultra-rapid metabolizer, the patient will, the ondansetron will be metabolized so quickly the patient will not have actually a treatment effect. So the therapy will fail, the patient will have decreased response and will still have severe nausea. And it is recommended to consider an alternative agent that is not metabolized by CYP26. And they've also given you an example like ranitidine. Okay, so if you would like to learn more about pharmacogenomics, there is this website, ISCPEG, and they have free pharmacogenomics resources available, online webinars that you can attend. This is for free, and it starts with basics of pharmacogenomics. Then there's also a cardiovascular tutorial that was written for healthcare professionals and also students in the field of pharmacogenomics. And it really takes you step by step, working through a patient case. If you scan this QR code, it will take you to the tutorial, and this is freely available. We're all working on one for oncology as well. And then I also just want to inform you about the Pharmacogenomics Global Research Network, if you have not heard about this group before. So this is a global organization that really promotes pharmacogenomics and research at a global level and also provides a great networking opportunity. So they have a LinkedIn page and they share a lot of information. Membership is free for members, for colleagues from low to middle income countries for the first year. They have a lot of special interest groups. So for example, membership, global committee, or there is an education committee or implementation committee. And this is really an opportunity for you to learn about pharmacogenomics in a very exciting way. They have webinars that's presented usually every second week, and it's very informative. I've really learned a lot by just joining these webinars, and it's really very interesting to hear from experts around the world. So these are some of the references if you would like to explore them more. I would be happy to connect with you via email or LinkedIn and see how we can further advance pharmacogenomics in Africa. I'm also happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you so much. It's been such an amazing session. Very, 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 very practical. I really, really appreciate, and we're very grateful. So we would move straight to questions now. We've just spent an hour already, so move straight to questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put up your hand, and we would call on you, and you unmute and ask your question. So we would start with I've not seen any question in the chat box. So is there anyone who has any questions? You can just unmute and ask your questions right away. Okay, still no questions in the chat box yet. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask a question.
Good evening. Can I ask my question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation, both to you and the presenter. I really appreciate this session. So my
I'm
question
sorry,
is,
Fatima, we are struggling to hear you. Can you maybe speak up a bit?
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it sounds a bit better.
Okay. So my question is, the other time where you were showing us the pathway for tamoxifen metabolism, are you getting me?
Yes,
The
yes,
other
I'm
time
listening.
okay. So when you show the pathway, there were other enzymes apart from the CYP2D6 in the picture. So my question is just that, are those other enzymes also involved in the metabolism, like actively, or our major concern is the CYP2D6 alone for this particular drug?
Yes, so that is a great question. So some of them might be involved in the metabolism, but the CYP2D6 gene in tamoxifen is the actionable gene drug pair. So it tells that there has been a lot of research being done, and the information that is available tells us that there's enough information that we either need to recommend an alternative medicine or that we need to a dose change. So it might be, for example, with warfarin as well. There's like V41, CYP2C9, and a lot of others as well. But just there, we only know about those two where there's enough information. It doesn't mean that there's other enzymes that can have an impact. It's just that we don't know yet. There is a space on the ClinPGX website where you can look at, for example, all the genes that is relevant. They usually categorize them, but then they will show the level of evidence. So they'll show like where I showed you CPIC level A or B, it tells us there's enough information, but it might be that there is a level 3 evidence. So we can consider it. And there has been cases where I've seen, for example, when we look at a specific gene, this is not actionable, but maybe it's level 3. So it could be that this gene has an impact, but we just don't know yet. There's just not enough information to inform prescribing. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, great, great question and great response there, Nicole. I'm seeing a question in the chat box now. Since we don't have anyone putting up their hand, I'll just take that question. This is from Kufre Akman Nikot. It says, in Nigeria, genetics counseling as a training at the master's or PhD level is limited. What would you recommend, or what are your recommendations if someone wants to go through the route of genetic counseling rather than pharmacology?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. I'm not too familiar about genetic counseling in general, but maybe I can find out and I can share it with you, Destiny, and then you can share it with the team. So just to also inform you that so in African countries and low to middle income countries, there's generally a lack of training available in generally in pharmacogenomics, either as any healthcare professional. So I think there is, if I remember correctly, there is a group, the Human Genetics group there at the University of Cape Town at UCT. I do think that they have specific courses in genetic counseling. I'm not quite sure how they offer it, if it is offered remotely, but I would recommend that you explore that field, maybe looking at UCT's website. UCT also has a pharmacogenomics translational unit, and I know they also work with the Human Genetics network. So they might have some courses that is available. I'm actually not sure about international courses that is available, but I can see if I can find out for you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Great. I see this one from Daniel Wari says, what is the difference between a poor metabolizer and an ultra-rapid metabolizer?
Okay, good question. I'm gonna just share my screen again to show you visually, because it helps sometimes. Sorry, it's now doing this. It helps sometimes just visually see it. So, okay, so here we are. So here we have a normal metabolizer. So we have the medication concentration and you have your time here. So when you have a normal metabolizer, this is kind of the way how your body will absorb and eliminate the medication. When you have a poor or an intermediate metabolizer, it means that you are metabolizing this medicine at a slower rate compared to a normal metabolizer. And this means that the concentration of the medicine in the body will increase and it will be higher than normal. And the patient will have risk of side effects. But when you have like a rapid metabolizer or ultra rapid metabolizer, it will metabolize the medicine more quicker than a normal metabolizer. And it will actually have reduced concentrations in the body. And you will have increased risk of treatment failure because the patient will not respond effectively to the medicine. But I just want to remind you that you just have to remember if it's an inactive prodrug or an active prodrug, because the effect of the metabolism is different in these two agents. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, great. I see three questions in the chat box now. I don't know, perhaps even more than three. Oh, more than three. I don't know how many would you take. So
yes, okay. We can go through them.
next
So
one.
I'm reading them.
Okay. I think the next one is similar to the one that you took earlier, but I'll just read it anyway. It says, thank you for the wonderful lecture. I'm interested in becoming a genetic counselor as a nurse. Is there any short course that gives certification for such with global recognition?
Yeah, so I think I'll see reach out to some of the colleagues at UCT and hear what courses are available. At an international level, recognizing it depends on the country. I'm not sure about if there's any courses on for genetic counselors at an international level. But I can see if I can find out and then share it with you, Destiny.
Okay, great. I'll take this next one. It says, when a pharmacogenomic variant is identified, how often is it functional impacts experimentally validated versus computationally predicted? I'm not sure I got that. I'll take
Yeah,
that
okay.
again. You got
Yes,
that?
so I think basically they want to know if we look at the variant and it's been identified, how do they determine if it has like clinical impact, and do they actually look at, I think, at like studies, or do they actually look at if it is predicted by models? As far as I understand, most of these, when a variant is detected, they can inform PharmVar about the alleles and the genes, and then they would validate it and update the website, especially if research are being done in Africa or other countries. I know that they are looking at models in terms of predictions, but I'm not sure how far that is at this stage. It can be very advanced. But as far as I know, for example, the guidelines, the CP guidelines, look a lot at actually studies being conducted in patients. They might report on like in vitro studies and things like that, but most of these are from actual patients, looking like at randomized controlled trials or observational studies, depending on what is available. And usually they report that in the results or in the literature on the ClinPGX website as well.
Okay, great. I see a lot of questions here in the chat box. I don't know how many of these questions can we still take, Nicole?
You said so? Okay, I see there's quite many. Okay, so maybe I'll just read them and respond to them. So
Yeah,
there's a
fantastic.
question from, how are these doses adjusted for intermediate metabolizers, or do they not require adjustment? So it's very specific to each gene and to each medicine. So that's why you need to look at the guidelines. It's not general blanket, if this patient is an intermediate metabolizer, these are the recommendations, because every gene has different alleles and functions that are determined. So you have to look at the guideline. Sometimes there's enough information to make a dose recommendation, sometimes there's not. Then there's also a question about the role of pharmacogenomics in clinical diagnosis. So that's also a good question. There is disease pharmacogenomics. So when they look at, for example, cancer and see what is the resistance, what is the, for example, is it estrogen sensitive receptor? So there are disease pharmacogenomics as well, where pharmacogenomics is just looking at the medication, and that's in clinical implications. Okay, so the question about pregnancy and CYP2D6 is it also depends on the, remember with pregnancy, there's a lot of changes that actually happens in the body. So there's your volume of distribution increases, and that can often lead to impact of medication and metabolism. It's not always related to, a gene. Your genes are your genes, and it's not really that's going to change unless you have medicines that impacting that. But those changes in pregnancy is often related because of the increase in volume of distribution and the metabolism and all of the changes that actually happens in that process. Okay, then there's a question about ethical issues. Yeah, that is quite an interesting question. There is a link to an ethical guideline that was written by African experts on this area. For example, it is recognized as a complex a topic, so it is important that patients are actually educated on pharmacogenomics. It's also patient data. It is human genetics. It can tell us a lot about a patient and about their diseases and their risk. So for example, depending on your panel, it can tell us, if your patient has increased risk for bleeding or increased risk for cancer, and who has access to that data, and what is the implications? Should medical aid know? Should they not know? So there's a lot of ethical things those are just some of the examples, but I would recommend you to look at that guideline. Then there's a question. Okay, So are drugs generally developed with intermediate metabolizers in mind? That's an interesting question. I think pharmacogenomics can help us to assist with drug development. So if you know, for example, that you would have poor metabolizers that would need a different dose, it can guide prescribers it can guide developers to design medicine differently, but it would depend. There's a lot of other factors that also influence patient response. So we have to think about this realistically. Okay, how can pharmacogenetics help in dose adjustments? So I think, it can either you need an increased dose or a lowering the dose. So depending on if the patient, for example, have side effects or not, but it would depend on the metabolizing status of the patient and if the medicine is like an active prodrug or an inactive, or an active parent drug or an inactive prodrug. So pharmacogenomics is a tool to help us to practice personalized medicine. So I also just I see this pharmacogenetics and pharmacogenomics. So this is not something I mentioned in my presentation, but it is something to be aware of. So pharmacogenetics is when you look at a specific gene and the patient response to medicine. But pharmacogenomics is when you look at the whole genome and you see what is my patient response to medicine. Okay, so there's a question, if an adverse drug reaction occurs in a patient even after pharmacogenetic, what else could be responsible? So there's various like alleles that influence patient response. So it might be that there's just not enough data maybe to inform that recommendation. There's maybe a need for more testing, for more research. And I think that's why pharmacovigilance is so important, that we actually report these adverse drug reactions to see if there's more research that's being done. But you have to also explore other factors that might have had an influence if there's drug-drug interactions. I think each case needs to be investigated. Okay, so I think, Destiny, that was all the questions. I think somebody raised their hand as well.
That was Imam Begon. Imam, are you still on the call? Are you still on the call, Imam Begum? Okay.
Hello, this is me, Aman Begum from Pakistan.
Okay, yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question was about the pregnancy. Like we take doses in pregnancy, smaller age. We said now there may be chances of toxicity, but normally.
Sorry, Ivan, your line is not that good. Can you maybe just I don't know, speak a little bit louder or clearer? I'm struggling to hear.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, that's better.
Like my question was in pregnancy, like we said na, in pregnancy the dose, most of the drug are contraindicated, but whenever we take dose, so it will be lesser. Like when I talk about the lipitrolol drug, which is an antihypertensive drug. Okay, so in preeclampsia, when we give drug to a patient, so we give larger doses than normal. So, is there any things related to the genes which is involved in this, like CYP2D6? As I already mentioned in the chat box that question, but you answered, but I didn't get it that much the answer. Can
Okay.
you give me a satisfactory answer? So.
Yes. So the changes that happen during pregnancy is often related due to the changes that happens in the body of the female. So with pregnancy, there's this increase in volume of distribution, and sometimes when that happens, you can have an increase in clearance as well. So it's more related to the physiological changes that actually happens than because of the genes during that specific time. So, for example, with some of your anti-epileptic medicines, that would also need to be adjusted because of the physiological changes that happens in the pregnant woman. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Nicole. It's been such an amazing session. Thank you so much. To all the participants, for being part of today's session, to CPAN, the Clinical Pharmacists Association of Nigeria, Edo State chapter, and every one of the members here today present. I say a very big thank you for the collaboration. And we hope that going forward, the collaboration will continue to yield even greater fruits and even better fruits. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, most especially Nicole. Amazing session. Deeply grateful for your support to PharmaGenoXfE and to the work that we've been doing. We are really grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Destiny. Thank you, everyone, for great questions. Keep well.
All right, thank you so much. So before we get out, I'll just say a few things about the next sessions we're going to be having, as well as some other announcements. So stay tight. I just shared the attendance link now in the chat box. Do well to sign the attendance. And the next session we're going to be having is going to be the session with Professor Kazim Oshikoya, the session we had to reschedule. So sit tight and watch out for the announcements. The dates, the time, and everything will be announced via the WhatsApp group, as well as the email with which we all registered. So watch out for that. We'll also drop information about that on our LinkedIn channel. And the next thing to say is about the survey. During the last session we had, I did mention that we're going to have a survey that will be dropped on the WhatsApp group, as well as sent to some of us, all of us on via the emails that we registered with. So watch out for that as well. We're going to be sharing that. And just to speak even more on the collaboration with CPAN, the Clinical Pharmacists Association of Nigeria, please, let's do well to share this opportunity with other persons within the field of pharmacy, outside the profession of pharmacy, the medical doctors, the nurses. We all need every one of us on the boat to get to brainstorm, to get to learn these things together, to get to see these challenges that we'll have together, especially in low and middle income countries, which of course a lot of the countries here in Africa fall into. So we will be able to be well equipped. This that is very instrumental to all we do here. So once again, the announcements regarding the next session, the dates, the time, and other such would be communicated to us via our emails. For those of us who have asked about the recording of this session, you can always visit our YouTube channel. You can always visit our YouTube channel, PharmaGenoXfE, and for this session as well there on the YouTube channel. And you can review that at any time at your leisure. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ben. I see the wonderful messages in the chat box. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. So this is what we're going to be joining the curtain today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we hope to see you in the next session. Trust me, you do not want to miss the other sessions that we have planned for the series. You certainly do not want to miss them, because they are going to be power packed. We have sessions on pharmacogenomics and precision medicine, innovations and startups. So a small business or whatever around precision medicine? How do you start up things around precision medicine, be it diagnostic tools, be it testing devices, whatever. So we're going to be having an amazing professional, an amazing expert with decades of experience in this field to talk to us on that. On to miss that session. A session about implementation of pharmacogenomics into curriculums. I'm aware that a good number of our countries in Africa, as well as other developing countries, do not have pharmacogenomics integrated into the curriculum of whether pharmacy, medicine, nursing, biochemistry, just have enough precision medicine implemented. So we're going to be having a session on that. We're also going to be having a session on oncology, precision oncology. So you certainly do not want to miss the rest of these sessions. Do well to stay tuned and watch out for the announcement of this session. And when they are announced, do well to share with others as well, so that at the end of the day, to do more for and the world at large. So once again, thank you so much, everyone. We'll call it a wrap here today. Good night, um, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Bye-bye. I see some questions in the chat box. Yeah, no problems. For those following on, you can always reach out to me. I see your message here in the chat box now. Perhaps you've been able to sign the attendance, but for those on YouTube, watching live on YouTube who couldn't join the Zoom call, you can send me a message or to any of the admins on the WhatsApp group. We'll send you the attendance, please. Yeah, certainly there will be certificates at the end of the series. You're welcome, Monique. You're welcome, Bolarin. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for your questions. Yeah, the time and date for the next session will be announced. I see a question about that. Link to the WhatsApp. I don't know. We've shared the link to the WhatsApp group a couple of times now. In fact, through the emails with which you registered. Augustine, I don't know. Could you send a message to the PharmaGenoXfE email? I'll drop that in the chat box now. I just dropped the email in the chat box. You can send an email to that with your request, please. I'm not sure I'll be able to get the link here now. I'm not sure I got your question, Sarah Al-Mutari. I'm not sure I got your question. Could you? If you could rephrase that, please. I'm not sure I got it. Or you can just unmute and ask your question, if that's fine with you. Yeah, sure. You can join the WhatsApp group. You can join the WhatsApp group. Send an email to the email I dropped earlier, at gmail.com. an email to that with your request. We'll send you the link to the WhatsApp group. We'll also make sure to, but did you receive the email? Did you receive the email we sent today regarding today's meeting? Sarah and Augustine, if you're still on the call, you can unmute and speak. Did you receive the emails?
Yes, I did, sir. I received the email today.
Okay, great. So what would happen is this: you can just you did to Sarah, right? Okay, what would happen is you can just hold on sending any email to PharmaGenoXfE. So what we'll do is we would send the link, we would attach the link to the WhatsApp group to the next email we're going to be sending to you. So by the time we're having the next session, you should be able to join the WhatsApp group. We would attach the link to the WhatsApp group to that email as well, so you can join via that link. I don't know if that's okay. Okay, so this is what we're going to draw the curtain now. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session, and see you in the next session. Good night. Yeah, Daniel, those would be very, very appreciated. Yeah, please, we would like to get those recommendations, please. Yeah, good night, everyone. Good night. Good night, Martins.